Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our monthly webinar that we've been doing here with SAS Soil for the last few months, and have a great lineup of producers and speakers coming to you further out into the future. So it's great to have you with us. For those that may be new to us, SAS Soil is a non-profit organization dedicated to advancing agriculture systems that improve the land and environment for future generations. Throughout the year, we're going to host a whole lineup of different events, including summer field days, soil health workshops, and our big annual soil health conference. If you'd like to stay in the loop with us or get involved, we'd love to have you, that's for sure. Just visit us at sassoil.ca to sign up for our newsletters or become a member, would be better yet. Tonight's webinar is made possible in part by the Farm program, which provides free independent online learning, workshops and mentorship and follow-up support focused up on cover cropping, nitrogen management, and advanced grazing systems. So just before we get going into Michael's presentation here, just a little bit of housekeeping. If you have any questions for Michael, please enter them in the Q&A section, and we'll answer them as they come up. And yeah, so with that, we'll get on to introducing Michael. Michael Ferguson is a fourth generation farmer on his family grain farm in Star City, Saskatchewan. And that's a strictly grain farm. Michael and his wife, Regan, along with Michael's parents, have gone through a successful farm transition. Failure is a great educator on his farm, showing room for improvement, while success continues to move the bar higher for goals and aspirations. They're very involved in their local community and area while trying to share their knowledge to those who ask. Michael understands the importance of educating his customers and trying to help the agriculture sector with misconceptions. They want to embrace the newest technology on their farm while becoming experts in mastering the oldest technology available farming with nature. So yes, Michael is a very smart cat, and lots to learn here tonight, folks. So with that, we welcome you, Michael, and hopefully you can figure out how to do the rest.
Okay, I think my screen's sharing here now.
I think so, I can see it.
Okay, if you can see it, that's good. So my IT department is not here. It's my wife and she's with the kids, so I got a quiet house. So I'm doing this all by myself. So yeah, thanks for having me, Tanya, Rob, SAS Soil. I appreciate it. So the presentation I'm going to give today, or I guess tonight, is on managing marginal acres on my farm. So I'm from Northeast Saskatchewan, like Rob said, just outside of Star City. And I've kind of stumbled upon this by accident. I didn't go looking for it, but my schooling's in finance and accounting, so I'm very numbers orientated. My wife is an agronomist, so she's the kind of the technical person on the ground with weeds and fertilizer, stuff like that. But for me, the numbers are a big thing for me. I started off with this picture, and this is probably my favorite field, and it's a perfect illustration on marginal land. So in the bottom left-hand corner, you could see a perennial mix of cover crop in there. The top left-hand corner, and then kind of it looks like those dead spots. We actually sprayed those out because that's where we seeded cover crops with their cereals. And then the rest of the green part is regrowth that we had. So we were able to combine this field. We got some rains and there's a lot of regrowth. So this picture was taken actually like October 20th. As you can see, a lot of the surrounding fields are dead. But yeah, we chose to kind of have a free cover crop with the regrowth with the oats. So This is just one example of kind of where we start to pick out marginal acres on our farm. So this is just a picture of my wife and three kids. So really today I want to talk about kind of what is a marginal acre on my farm. Why are the reasons that I'm doing different practices on these acres? And I'd like to share some of the practices. Maybe it's a fit for you, maybe it's not. You got to remember that each person has their own context that they have to work in. So what I have available for tools might be different. Like Rob said, we're strictly a grain farm. I don't have any livestock. I don't have any cows. Um, I don't want to have any cows for anyone who's wondering. I like my flip-flops and I like going to the lake. So but like Rob said, I'm a kind of a lifelong long learner too when it comes to farming. So every year, different weather, different challenges. Every year we kind of reassess what worked, what didn't work, why. And I'd like to share some of that stuff with you. Um, Also too, some people ask me why do I do things maybe a little bit differently? And I honestly don't know why. Like obviously the numbers speak out to me and I go, well, let's change something. But I think one of the biggest reasons is my kids. I want to lead by example that, continue to learn even when you're out of school. So I have a lot to learn. I want to lead by example with them. They've learned a lot. It's amazing what little kids will pick up when you drag them along with you to go to work at in the evenings and places like that. But yeah, I want to lead by example and just kind of help share that knowledge as well. So like Rob said, we're kind of in northeast Saskatchewan. So here's a nice little map where we are. We're that red dot. You can go a little bit further north of us, about an hour, 30 minutes, you start to hit some forest. But after that, it's basically where all the fires were this spring. So um, I was just telling Tanya earlier, I gave a presentation in Arizona this winter, and I was told that, oh yeah, we can't do this practice because we're so far north and our growing season's so short and things like that. And then I show them a picture of this map of where I'm from, and they go, oh, well, yeah, never mind, you're further north than us. And I was in the Peace Country in Alberta as well, and uh, same thing. They have certain challenges there, but like I said, go back to the context of what you have for your own tools and what success is. So understand what constitutes a marginal area. So when we started looking at that, we got into variable rate, and here's an example of the same field that I showed you in the very first slide, where the bottom left-hand corner was always poor. It was prone to flooding, topography, things like that. And so we started looking at these maps to say, well, how do we treat each zone differently? How do we treat the dark green versus the red versus the orange versus the light green to kind of become more efficient? Um, but this field was very easy to maybe do some stuff with because most of that marginal land is in the one corner, so we were able to cut that out. Now I realize that isn't the case with every field. I'll show you an example here in the next slide, but this was easy for us to take apart. There was approach there, everything. But yeah, you guys know your fields best. You know which areas produce the best, you know which areas don't, you know why. So on this field, kind of in the bottom right hand corner, there's a little yellow spot right where my mouse is, and that's a little gravel run. It doesn't go far, it doesn't, it's not very big, but you could see that in the picture where there's that stripe. And it just doesn't produce the same as 50 feet over one way or the other. So yeah, we started looking at poor soil quality, terrain slope. Um, Kind of what I look at too is, how does that impact crop production? So, where that strip is where it's gravel, it's basically turned already, and on both sides the rest of the crop is green. So what does that mean for yield? What does that mean for inputs? What I need to do? How can I treat that differently? Um, also too, I would say resource allocation. We kind of took the approach where we said, why are we putting fertilizer in areas that we're not seeing a return on our investment? And so we try and be very efficient with our investment in our crop. Um, you know, treating the very low stuff the same as the high stuff or the mid slopes. I didn't find that very efficient, so we've kind of made those changes in our prescription maps and things like that. This is a field, I actually really like this. This is our home half section, and when we started doing variable rate, my dad said, "Yeah, you know what? This field it's corner to corner flat. It's the same. There's no zones, no nothing." And you can see where what we've started doing is seeding cover crops in with cereals, and then we kind of base that on where our fertilizer is. So on the right hand side, that picture it shows where the red is. Those are very poor producing areas. The topography, that's where kind of the water runs are. The pink areas, or sorry, the purple areas are really high producing areas. And so on this field, this half section, we have 22 acres of cover crop. It's kind of spread out. And so on that other field, we had 35 acres, but it was mostly it was all in the corner. And so we are able to cut and bale it, where this field, we don't really have that option just because of where it is, how it's laid out in the field. So we continue to put cover crops in those low areas to have growth in the fall time when the crop is harvested and in the springtime. But if I was to ask the crowd today, what part of that field do you think is the best producing part of the field? If you have experience with kind of variable rate and maps like that, you'd say, well, the purple, obviously, that's where, that's the best parts of the field. And I would agree with you. So topography is a big thing. That's kind of where one reason why we have the cover crops in there, fertilizer in there. Salinity is another portion. In this field here, there's not a lot of salinity. There is some kind of right here along the road, and we kind of address that with the cover crop and certain grasses. But also too, we're very lucky because we're from the black soil zone, very rich soil, high organic matter. But in other parts of Saskatchewan, you could have peat moss in one area, and then you got sand, 100 feet away, and you run into certain challenges. So, like I said, your cropland the best. This is just, please remember context for Melfort, Saskatchewan. So this field is a unique experience for us. So, like Rob said, we're strictly a grain farm, but this was the first field that we were able to get cows on to graze. Now we don't own the cows. We worked with a young producer who is struggling to buy pasture land. The price of land continues to go up. So we're working together collectively, and you could see there's a couple pieces that were grazed over here. We kind of had 4 different paddocks, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then this piece was baled for silage bales. But when I talk about kind of logistically challenged areas and unprofitable zones, the one thing I wanted to point out with this is this field is 130 cultivated acres, but there's this big creek and bush in here. And when I look back at the costs that I have to pay for that every year, it's $8 an acre I pay in taxes. So, there's still a cost of having this creek here. I've never ever been able to get any money produced from that area until we started grazing cattle in there. And last fall we grazed cattle for an extra, I think it was 3.5 weeks, kind of in this creek here, and they cleaned it all up. This year they're back in the creek, and that's probably one of their favorite places because the grass just grows like crazy with the spring floods had lots of moisture. They got a little bit of trees, a little bit of bush in there for flies and things like that. And when I went and checked in there, they were all in the creek here tonight. But so that's kind of what I mean with areas that are unprofitable. I've never had a chance to make money on it. Logistical challenges, zones that are difficult to access. So actually on this field here, there's this little corner piece that we used to be able to farm, but there was a low spot that came through here, and then we weren't able to cross back there. But the trouble is that little piece is little. And the equipment today is just too big to get into some of those areas. Um, this field is one of our best fields, producing fields. It's higher dirt, and my dad asked kind of why we were doing it there, and I said, well, one, with the creek, to try and get some more revenue and trying to kickstart cover crops and grazing into our rotation versus just doing cover crops in certain areas like I showed you in the last field. So we are doing it area specific, but now we're starting to work it into our rotation as well. So why do we do this? Well, it's about the money, to be honest. It's very simple. When I go back to my accounting hat on and my finance hat is, ultimately, I need to be able to make money or not lose as much money in those poor areas. Um, we all have bills to pay. I would like to buy more land. I would like to keep investing in our farm infrastructure, bins. I would love to take my kids to Disneyland, things like that. And if I can make money off areas that I historically haven't, that goes right to the bottom line. And there's also a number of programs out there that are trying to encourage trying to encourage producers to be able to maybe adopt some different practices. And I feel like for myself, we started with our worst land, and now we've got to the mindset of, well, we're willing to invest in cover cropping and different things like that on our good land now because we know that we saw the payout and that return on investment.
Mike, can I interrupt for 1 second? We have
Yep.
our first question. Um, what cover crops are you using with your VR, and which outfit are you using for your prescriptions?
Yeah, so we work with a local agronomist, Shark Ag Consulting. They're out of Melfort. They kind of do kind of the northeast. So they make all our maps. We've used them now for, I'd say, close to 10 years, ever since we started VR. Um, they this was kind of new to them, is doing the cover crops. But when I explained, it's no different than your variable rate fungicide where it's on off and different practices. They've continued to see that. And then for the cover crops, we have like sunflower, we have some clovers in there, we have some grasses, we have some beets, some radish as well. We continue to tweak that blend kind of every year based on the cost of the seeds too. So some year the cost of the seeds spike and some years they drop. So my wife, being the agronomist, and she'll tweak with what she feels is best and kind of what the conditions are. So yeah, it's actually, I think I got it here. We do, um, let's see here. Turnip, beet, clover, festololium, and sunflower. That's what it was this year. That was our mixture. So this was any other questions, Tanya?
No, just the one for now.
Okay. Um this slide is really neat, and I bring this one up. I know it says 2021, but when I asked you what part of the field do you think is the best, and I kind of said, well, obviously the purple is going to be the best. In 2021, when we had the drought, our most profitable acres were the acres where the cover crop was seeded, and a lot of that came from basically managing risk. So we don't know when we seed a crop if it's going to be a drought in July or August or what might happen, but having that risk pre-planned with, this is what I'm comfortable with. We actually had something we don't want to happen, where our kind of a marginal land made us the most money, and basically a lot of that was cost reduction strategy. So we cut back the fertilizer in those areas, we cut back spraying as well, and basically we were a lower cost producer because of those cutbacks. We still had some yield in those areas, but that yield spread between our poor areas and our good areas were very small. So we do this kind of every year, and we this is one of the ways we identified what a marginal acre is. if we see that we're losing money in the red 3 out of 5 years or 4 out of 6 years, whatever it is, I go, we got to change something because I don't like losing money. So let's manage that risk, or how can we make money on it? What do we have to do differently? But it's always a balance because, for me, we cut back on fertilizer in those areas, but I don't want to cut back on yield. So where's that fine line of cutting back on inputs, but not reducing your yield based on fertility? So the environmental considerations and stewardship, we've kind of tried to make that a focus on our farm, where we said, okay, what can we do to kind of help prevent soil degradation, reduce runoff erosion, promoting biodiversity, and just sustaining farm health overall. And this is a picture of a neighbor's field in the springtime that they've gone out with a vertical till machine. And you could see that erosion on that land. So for us, what we try and do is, when we're selecting those areas that are at risk of erosion because of spring floods or whatever, those are the areas we're trying to see cover crops in. So we don't have that erosion come, so we don't see that topsoil go downstream. So kind of planning ahead on that side as well. Biodiversity, there's a lot you can learn from a 4 and 6 year old. We were driving across the field, and I was on the side by side, and my kids were on their little side by side, and all of a sudden the kids stopped theirs and started chasing butterflies. And they were in where the cover crop was, and they said, "Dad, look at all the butterflies." And there must have been like 2 dozen butterflies around them, where there wasn't any of that in the grain land where we had already combined and that. And it was really neat to see. It's not something that I was originally looking at, but kind of again came across because of the kids and by accident. So operational efficiencies and equipment limitations. This is not our tractor. Don't worry, we can't afford that. But one of the things that we ran into is just these small acres that were 1-2 acre fields. What are we doing? We have a 90-foot sprayer, and that's a small sprayer. There's sprayers up to what, 140 feet, 160 feet now, and you can't even turn around with some of that stuff. So those, efficiencies from a logistical standpoint are there on many farms. It's difficult because machinery keeps getting bigger because we want to become more efficient on those other 90% of the acres that we farm. And so we've kind of had to change some of our management strategies. We've had to get some equipment that goes on the back of quads or little tractors, things like that, to be able to get into those areas to try and make them better. But I feel that's a great investment, and there's a fit for it on our farm. So our farm is about 3,000 acres. We're not a huge farm, but yeah, probably about 10% of our land that we farm I would consider marginal. So we use cover crops to kind of jumpstart soil health. Like I said, we've been trying to work it into the rotation slowly. Um, when 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 we do our budget in the springtime, that says here's the cost of fertilizer, here's the cost of grain, here's typically what we grow. Um, it's tight. Margins are tight right now. Prices are down. Um, and so we've made a focus of trying to do more of this while prices are low to boost our land efficiency. So hopefully we can take advantage of it when prices are higher. But yeah, soil erosion, organic matter, improved water infiltration. So the 1 year, um, actually 2 years we did cover crops, and I was ready to throw in the towel. It was dry, it didn't rain, and I was like, these cover crops just don't work. I'm done with them. But we had moisture probes in that field, and we had moisture probes in the field across the road. And so they both had the same amount of rain. But in the springtime, when we looked at those moisture probes, the one with the cover crop had an extra 2 inches of available water in the soil. Now, most of that water was down to the 70 and 100 centimeter levels. So the water actually soaked in better on that land versus flooding and running off. And so that was okay, I'm going to keep doing these cover crops to see what it does. We did a soil test as well that spring, and we did see higher organic matter where we had the cover crops. Now, I don't believe it quite as much as my wife, but because I think organic matter can be very different in fields. Like if I was to move 10 feet over, might be a different reading, right? But the water infiltration is what kind of really got me excited because I'm a big fan of water-driven yield potential. So reducing fertilizer and chemical, I showed you a map already that kind of showcased the red on the fertilizer side where we cut back. This is the same field, and basically we're able to reduce the chemical as well. So you could see in those areas where we didn't spray the crop. So again, there's no fertilizer going down, there's no chemical, but we're targeting those poor areas that, it doesn't actually make a difference if we put fertilizer or put chemical. Last year we actually had a lot of thistle where we didn't spray, and which is kind of normal for us. But so did the neighbors. They had thistle as well that came up and was very prevalent in their crops. So, same kind of thing. I know they don't have cover crops, and they sprayed it, but yet they still had thistle problems. So, we try and use a lot of precision farming on our operation. We don't have new equipment. We have a 5710 drill, but we do have a newer tank with the 7550, and then our sprayer is about 8 years old. But we do have the GPS and then the maps that go with it, and then our combines have the yield mapping as well. So site specific management and adaptive strategies. One of the things that we decide to do is um, try and pick management practices that are suitable for that field. So, here's just an example is when I came back, I started wanting to grow pulses again. My dad goes, "Oh, you don't grow peas because you can get, 5 bushels an acre to 60 bushels an acre, and you never know." And so we tried it on the one field that had a low spot, and it was the first picture in the slide. And basically, we had 3 inches of rain in 1 week, and 35 acres just flooded out, and the peas didn't grow in there. We ended up working it to make it black, and basically, I said, "Well, how do we ever grow peas on low land?" And so what we've started doing is doing intercropping. So we grow peas and oats, and kind of the thought behind that is, well, if it floods or lots of rain, the oats will do good, and if it's dry, the peas will do good. So we're in year 5 of that here now, and this year, fortunately, it's a bit drier year, and we have peas and oats, and we have lots of peas in it, a little less oats. So it'd be interesting to see what that mixture is like. But from a profitability standpoint, I actually think it's just as good as growing oats, if not better, as the price of nitrogen's come up. And then with the precision mapping on that intercropping, we actually do variable rate seeding. So on the hilltops, we seed more peas. In the low spots, we seed more oats as well to try and take advantage of that. So I'm going to show a quick video here. And I'm going to skip it.
So my block comes in, and maybe you can see instantly what's going to happen. So this is no-till. Conventional till. Kind of a big difference already, hey, if you can see it. So this is pasture. This is one of the floats. And this is the regen sample, the cover crop. Lots of pore space. Look at that.
So I just wanted to show that the regen actually came from one of our fields that hasn't been in regen that long. It's been basically we took out the tillage component of it, and then now it's been 3 years of cover crop, like a perennial mix that's a cover crop. And I would say before it was more like the conventional tillage. So that's really opened my eyes to how quickly kind of cover crops and some of these regen practices can change your soil. So economic and agronomic results of change practices. So I'm a big believer of defense wins championships. You know, the Riders, they're actually winning because they're playing defense for most of the game. I get it. Last week against the Elks was a different story where they gave up some late touchdowns, but for most, as far as I know, a team wins a game all the time if they score more points than they give up. So essentially, you need good defense, and I think the defense here now, we're trying to look at how do we improve yields. I look at that as more of the offense, but the cost reduction benefits, and how do we manage the variable outcomes? Because weather, all those things can really come into effect, and we don't have any control. But if we can get an additional 2 inches of available water, that will go a long way. So gonna kind of talk about some of the environmental benefits. So improved soil structure. If it's holding more water, it's healthier. The erosion I've kind of talked about, biodiversity I've talked about that, and the chemical use. So those are all things that, again, it keeps coming up over and over, and I don't think it's anything that I'm doing special. It's just more of a mindset that we've decided to go down this pathway. So some of the challenges we faced. So I was telling Tanya, this picture's from the beginning of May. So, hedgerows and field has more biodiversity erosion, but also there's some challenges with that too. So if you seed it on the north part of the field, well, your neighbor's going to be pretty mad because guess what's on his field here? He's going to be seeding into snow. So, if you seeded it on the south side of your land and, the east side of your field, or I guess the west side, that will kind of work. But yeah, you have to kind of be aware of some of that stuff. But yeah, we have snow into May, and we've seeded into snow banks along the trees as well. Soil conditions, did you get rains in the fall? Did you not? Are you dry or are you wet? The market side, I, I wish I knew what the markets were going to do every every year or every week. I guess it's getting tougher now with some of the tweets that go out that move the market, but ultimately the price of nitrogen impacts the economic side, the price of wheat, the price of canola. So, you look at that, the economics change drastically. And I did a study the one time from a field back when canola was higher and wheat was $14 a bushel. And basically just on grain prices coming down, it changed the profitability by about $120 a bushel compared to where it is now. So, when grain prices are low, that's why we're looking at doing a lot of these practices versus when canola's 25 versus when wheat's 14 and oats are 7. So just kind of a summary, we try and manage those marginal acres specifically to the field, specifically to kind of their solutions. And I always joke that, I'm like Billy Madison, where I feel like I'm still learning, and I'm really not ashamed to keep learning. I guess I get it from my mother. My mother's a teacher, and she taught elementary school, and I grew up watching her, in her 40s, in her 50s, and now, 60s. She continues to take courses, she continues to learn. Ultimately, we're very lucky with our succession plan that they're able to transition it to my wife and I. But I have that accountability to my parents and to the financial institutions to keep learning and keep improving, because our farm today doesn't look anything like it did 15 years ago. It's completely changed. The technology's changed. Some of the equipment's changed. Some of the equipment's the same, but there's new opportunities, new management practices. I was talking to my uncle here the other day, and I said, yeah, about the price of phosphate, and he goes, I remember when phosphate was $250 a ton, not $12.50 a ton. And I remember 30 years ago when wheat was $7 a bushel, and now it's still $7 a bushel, right? Like, it's amazing how the economics continue to just be a challenge for producers today. So, I guess to the environmental health benefits, I think proper management really really will help agriculture today tell our story of the good job that we do as producers. I think we need to tell that story more. My sister grew up on the farm. She's been in Edmonton now for, oh, I don't know how long it is, 20 years roughly. But even though she grew up in Melfort, Saskatchewan, she lives in Edmonton. She's starting to lose that connection to the farm. And her kids don't know where the foods come from and they don't understand a lot of that stuff. So the environmental health benefits, they look at some of the labels on the food and different things like that. And I think there's a huge opportunity as producers here, and there's probably every single person on the call can say how they're doing some kind of benefit for the environmental side and animal side and biodiversity side. So I think we need to continue to tell that story and educate that urban population. So yeah, I talked about kind of continuing to learn. It's every year is different, and I'm sure I could probably learn something from everyone on the call because there's no way I've thought of everything like that. And I think a lot of these um the groups like Sask Soil is key because going to the conventions like Rob mentioned and some of the meetings, you get talking to other neighbors, you get talking to other producers, and there's a lot we can learn from each other. So I'll just say, Tanya, thank you for having me, and hopefully someone, you know, everyone was able to take one, maybe two things away from this. Don't be overwhelmed that maybe you're not doing everything, but I didn't start by doing everything. I started by doing one thing, and that was trying some cover crops on the field, and then it was looking at profit maps and things like that. And it's kind of scary because once you get on that flywheel and once you change that mindset, it's kind of exciting and fun and dangerous. Like I feel like I'm that rebel. So
Thanks. Thank you, Mike. That's terrific. I've never heard someone self-describe as a rebel before, but I love it.
well, it's probably a bad description because it's like, well, you're just doing what kind of the mindset in agriculture has trained us not to do, right? We want to get bigger, we want to get more efficient. It's about farming more acres and pushing down bush. And I go, well, is pushing down that bush going to do anything? Because I'll go back to this slide here. There's a bush, and my one buddy was like, "Why don't you just push this in?" And I said, "Well, because it's a big slough. Like it's not going to do anything if I push it in." So there's this little bush right here, and all it is a big hole. Well, pushing in trees, what's it gonna do? Because that area floods out, and I could ditch it, but every year you get a rain, it's just gonna be filled right back up. So
Yeah, excellent. As we wait for some questions to get typed in, I'm sure there's lots. One that comes to my mind is what are you starting to observe changes on how those low spots, how the soil is functioning, and how it's starting to respond to your management?
yeah, actually, it's kind of neat because those marginal acres, when we start to look at it, I've always thought like maybe they're not producing because it's literally had 40 years of flat rate of nitrogen on it and it's never grown a crop. And so it's so saturated, and there's so much nutrient tie up in there. And so now that we've started cutting back, we've continued to soil test those areas and there's still huge amounts of nitrogen. And I'm like, and I haven't put anything down. So, getting some plants growing there has been a challenge. It's taken some time, but I kind of want to get to the part where I'm mining those areas because those areas, I believe, at least for me, have been over applied fertilizer for the last 40 years. And, it's just we need to kind of have plants that can help break that down or use some of that fertilizer, because if you keep applying fertilizer in those areas and nothing's growing, I don't like doing that because it costs me money to put that fertilizer there. I'd much rather put it somewhere else where I see a benefit. But yeah, the one piece, it's kind of funny because like nothing would grow there. And I said that to a colleague. I said, if I can get something to grow on this land, I'll believe in cover crops because this is like horrendous where it's always black. And on that piece, well, it was this field here, where these red dots are. basically that 35 acres last year, we had a yield of like 5.5 bales per acre. And so it was one of our most profitable pieces of land last year based on that, because we had 0 inputs, 5.5 bales an acre, and then we sold those bales. So yeah, we're seeing things actually grow, and it's nice.
Another question is, what software are you using for the profit maps?
Yeah, so there's a couple out there. We use the SMAG. I think it's SMAG or SMS. I think that's a platform that they use. Again, we do it through Shark Egg because they have our fertilizer. They have kind of all our costs in there. So every year they give us that report that says, here's where the profit is. We have to kind of make some assumptions when it comes to price if things aren't marketed or that, but we'll kind of take that price as of November or December and say, okay, using this price, did we make money? Yes or no? But yeah, I know like John Deere has a program. Lots of the other platforms do it as well, but yeah, we use that SMS Ag. But to be honest, Tanya, like when I kind of started that, I used just a pen and paper. Like I just kind of went back to, okay, well, here's my flat rate. Here's what my fertilizer cost was. Here's where my yield is, and I kind of did 2 different cost of productions. So my yield on the canola was 22 bushels here, but my input was the same, and my yield on my canola was 48 bushels here, right? And I kind of did that math, and that's kind of how it started. And I kind of said, well, we need to adjust that because I don't want to lose money. Like I if I saw $100 bill on the ground, 9 times out of 10 I'd pick it up. That 10th time my wife would probably beat me to it, but
I have another question here for you, Mike. Could you just kind of describe a bit as to how this works, like for those on the call tonight that maybe don't quite follow how the maps would work? So how does that turn on in your zones, and then what happens, and then how does your spraying work? And could you describe the mechanics of it a bit?
yeah, so kind of we get the maps made up and they'll use like historical data. So on the right here, you'll see like a fertilizer prescription map. And so it's kind of similar to, what are the zones of the field? You break it out into that. And then kind of what we do is we sit down and say, okay, what's your budget? How much money do we want to put in for fertilizer? Where are the prices today? What's our target yield? What based on our soil test, how much available nutrients is there? Where do we need to get to kind of match that? And so on our farm, I'm more cautious. Like, I'm not shooting for 60 bushel an acre canola because all of a sudden you don't get you only get 4 inches of rain. Are you going to get it? I don't know. But we'll kind of use average moisture, average yields, and kind of go with that. So my philosophy is I don't need to hit a home run, but if I can hit doubles every year, I'm gonna be here for a long time farming. And so that's kind of my mentality is I'm a doubles guy. If I hit a triple, good. If I hit a home run, good. But worst case scenario, I want to hit a single. I don't want to strike out. I don't want to be boom or bust. So kind of even on our cropping plan, we'll say this is a budget. How does it match with our insurance, whether it's used ag stability, whether it's private insurance, whether it's crop insurance? And those really play a key role too, is having that backstop. Like I said, my mom and dad were very, I don't know if brave or, trusting to do the transition. And the last thing I want to do is have to go back to them and say, hey guys, I put all our money into these zones, and guess what? We only got 3 inches this year, and I can't pay the bills. I need you to bail me out, right? So trying to manage that risk every year. But yeah, the fertilizer and the expenses, it's going to depend on the price of everything, price of the grain that's insured for. But basically, the equipment, when you're going up and down the field, all of a sudden the rates change automatically. So you're going. It's putting down X amount for fertilizer in the pink, and then once it gets into the green, it puts a little bit less, yellow a little bit less, and red it shuts off, and then it turns on. So we have sectional control, so we have six sections on our drill. So if one part of the section is in yellow but the other part's in red, it can do that as well. That was an investment that we had to make on our older equipment, and I'm very happy I made that. Because I think just from a cost savings, it's key as well. And then same thing when we're seeding our cereals, we actually have the cover crop in our saddle tank. Same kind of thing as any part that it's purple over here. When you cross it, it starts seeding that, and it seeds it down the mid row, and then it actually is shuts off as well. So I always joke, and maybe you guys have heard this, but the first year we did this, my dad, he's the guy in the drill, he didn't actually know he was seeding a cover crop until fall time when the sunflower came up, and he goes, well, what's going on here? I said, I don't know, you seeded it, you tell me. Now I didn't see no sunflowers, and I said, no, it was a cover crop, and we did that on purpose, right? So but yeah, we've been doing this now 5 or 6 years, and yeah, there's a few weeds in there because we don't spray, but I look at the types of weeds, and there's a book. I think you probably know that book, Rob, When Weeds Talk, right? So why is this weed here? And well, it's high in nitrates, or it's in areas that there's excess nitrates and stuff like that. So it's actually really interesting when you see what kind of weeds pop up and you start to look at it. It makes a lot of sense, and I'm not that smart when it comes to agronomy, but it makes sense for me.
Awesome. And then when you're spraying, your maps go into the sprayer. So does the sprayer turn off?
Yeah, so the same map that's used for the cover crop goes into the sprayer, and same kind of thing as every section as it crosses the pink line. It'll be spraying in the red, and then it shuts off in the pink, and then it turns back on in the red. So um my wife actually drove the sprayer the one time, and she was panicking because the sprayer was turning on and off, and I said, no, it's because of the map, don't worry, this is what we wanted to do. Because in my head, there's again not a lot of point of putting a cover crop if I'm just going to kill it 3 weeks later. So we had to make that adjustment, and in this first picture here, we actually went and sprayed because in these areas the thistle were pretty bad, because for 2 years, 2 out of 4 years, it didn't get any chemical applied in season, so the thistles were starting to get big. So we actually went back and we fall sprayed to kind of control them, and so we kind of do that once every 4 years on the field, just to kind of refresh and reset it. So
I'm not seeing any other questions.
well, and Tanya, maybe I'll just add another thing is a lot of this stuff I was able to do because I very focused on the numbers, and I want to make that change on the farm. But today there's more and more programs that are coming out that are helping with farmers with the cost of seed, the cost of planting, things like that. So there's lots of programs out there that will help. And actually, when you start to add those programs onto the economic analysis, it's like really good, really good money. And there's no other better time to try new things when there's programs out there that will help support that. So I'd highly encourage people to reach out and look into some of those programs.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, we are getting close to our time, and it seems like we've currently answered all the questions until probably midnight tonight, when everybody, or I'll have a few more for Michael later on, but but that's okay. So yeah, so we thank you very much for your time tonight, Mike, and for sharing what you guys are doing. It's really cool, really great way to use technology in a different little different way. And thanks for everyone who attended tonight. We really appreciate it. And please reach out if there's someone you think we should have on here. We'd love to get some suggestions and some feedback on it. Still fairly new to us, but I think it's a real good thing. So with that, our next webinar will be on the 28th of August with Lana Shaw, talking about intercropping and fertility rates. And so it'll be should be a lot of great information in that one as well. And coming up this fall, we'll have nitrogen management and cover crop workshops happening around Saskatchewan in November. We're bringing Joel Williams up for a 1,600 kilometer power loop here. So we're really looking forward to that, and just stay tuned to our website to find out what's coming up next. And until next time, we'll see you next time.
Well, and
Thanks,
Rob,
guys.
if there's any questions they got, feel free to reach out to me. I realize I didn't put my contact information, but send it into SAS Soil and I'll make sure to get those answers to you.
Okay, awesome. All right, thanks, guys. Well, everyone have a great evening and enjoy the long weekend.